Usually when I make one of these what I'm going to be reading this month videos, I've already started one of the books on the stack. That's because I'm always reading something, but as it happens, the timing here was kind of perfect. I finished a book last night and now I don't know which of these I'm gonna start with. I've got 10 books that I'm hoping to read in May. 3 of them are brand new review copies, one of which actually came out last month, but I got the review copy kinda late. Another one I'm not sure I can talk about very confidently on YouTube, and you'll see why in a sec. And the third is the reason I rewatched Midsummer last night. Ari Aster is absolutely one of the best filmmakers working today. I love all of his films, and not enough people watched Beau is Afraid. I'm just gonna put that out right now. Beau is Afraid is a masterpiece that almost everyone ignored, and I'm still annoyed about that. Anyway, here are 10 books that I want to read this month. I don't know which one I'm starting with though. So let's just go at random. I guess it makes sense to start with the book that I thought I was going to read last month while I was on holiday, but I didn't get to it. I took 3 books with me on vacation. I was only away for a week, and I did think that 3 was a little bit much considering I had other stuff to do and I was away with my partner's family who wanted to do stuff together, so I couldn't just sit and read all the time. Which was actually a good thing because I went to St. Michael's Mount, or as I very humorously called it, Le Mont Saint-Michel de l'Angleterre. If you get it, you get it. It's funny, I promise. Anyway, it was a really nice holiday, and I was gonna read Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I've never read this before. I've seen the original film. I don't think I saw the remake, and everyone says this is his scariest book. Even King himself said so. I read the introduction, which was really, really good. And my partner pointed out that reading a book about dead pets the first time we leave our kitten for an extended period of time might not be the best call, and that's part of the reason I didn't read it. We did leave Mary in the hands of a wonderful house sitter, by the way, and she did an amazing job. Mary was very, very happy and looked after. Anyway, maybe I'll read this first because people adore Pet Sematary, and if it really is King's scariest, I want to be scared. I've only read a handful of Stephen King books, honestly. I've read every book by his son, Joe Hill. I really like Joe Hill. But of Stephen King's books, I read half of the Dark Tower books before I gave up, like so many people do. I read and adored Misery, and again, also love the film. And I absolutely adored It, even though the ending is maybe the worst and most problematic ending of any book ever. Aside from the ending, It is a really, really great time, and it's one of the few really, really long books that I adore. I loved every second. I loved the fact that it was long. Anyway, Pet Sematary. I am finally going to read this month, maybe today, we'll see. For quite a few months now, I have tried to reread a book a month. I didn't do it in April, but up until then, I was doing this pretty consistently and proud of myself. And since coming back off my holiday, there is one book that I've really, really wanted to reread. But until now, I've put which book I reread in the hands of my patrons. And you can actually be one of them. If you want to support me at patreon.com/WillowTalksBooks, you can also vote on what books I read and what videos I make next. So I put it to a vote. I asked my patrons to pick out of 3 books that I wanted to reread. And I really did want to reread all 3 of these, but there was one I hoped that they would pick, and they bloody did. They picked the book I wanted to reread. Not all of them, obviously, about 45% did. And the book that got the winning vote was The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I am thrilled. I am so excited to reread this book. I've actually already read it twice, but it's been a good few years since the last time I read it. Ishiguro is my favorite author of all time. I talk about that quite a lot, I think. I think anyone who has watched more than one of my videos probably knows that Frankenstein is my favorite novel, and Ishiguro is my favorite author. And many people consider The Remains of the Day to be his best work, and I think I'm one of those people. Typically, the pendulum swings between this and Never Let Me Go, and I definitely prefer this to Never Let Me Go. Anyway, I really adore Ishiguro, and I'm very, very excited to get to reread this book. It's about a guy who goes on a long drive across England on a vacation that he didn't really want to take, but he takes the opportunity. And while I was driving from Cornwall to Glasgow in a single day, which took about 12 hours, I thought a lot about this book. and I really wanted to reread it, and my patrons were on my side. Thank you guys so much for that. Let's get into this very, very soon. The brand new book that's coming out in May and inspired me to rewatch Midsummer last night on my birthday is Lost in the Garden by Adam S. Leslie. This is getting published about 2 weeks from now by Dead Ink Books in the UK, and I can't wait to read it. This is a Wicker Man-esque horror novel as far as I understand it. Let's read the blurb. Heather, Rachel, and Antonia are going to Almonby. Heather needs to find her boyfriend who, like so many, went and never came back. Rachel has a mysterious package to deliver, and her life depends on it. And Antonia, poor, love-struck Antonia, just wants the chance to spend the day with Heather. So off they set through the idyllic yet perilous English countryside, in which nature thrives in abundance and summer lasts forever. And as they travel through ever-shifting geography and encounter strange voices in the fizz of shortwave radio, the harder it becomes to tell friend from foe. Creepy, dreamlike, unsettling, and unforgettable, you are about to join the privileged few who have come to understand exactly why we don't go to Almonby. A strange piece of post-apocalyptic horror that is inspired in some way by The Wicker Man. I'm on board. I can't wait to read this. Another book I'm very, very excited to read and review this month was sent to me by Pushkin Press. This is The No Mask Murder by Akimitsu Takagi. It was translated from the Japanese by Jesse Kirkwood, and Takagi is the author of The Tattoo Murder, a really, really fun locked room murder mystery novel that I read and reviewed like 18 months ago or so. I really enjoyed that book. I did a video on it. I love Japanese Honkaku murder mystery stories. They are wonderful. This one's a little different though. It's like half the length of The Tattoo Murder. It's a pretty slender thing. Much more Agatha Christie in its length. And in this one, Takagi actually has inserted himself into the story as a protagonist, as the sleuth. It's kind of like if Christie replaced Poirot with herself. Now, it's not uncommon for authors to project themselves onto their characters. And obviously autofiction, which is just fictionalized biographies, is a really big thing, especially when it comes to Japanese fiction. But this is neither of those things. The only other author I can think off the top of my head who actually puts himself into his own stories is my favorite Chinese author, Yan Lianke. And he never makes himself the protagonist. He's always just in the story somehow in a weird way. But yeah, this is about Takagi himself solving a crime. He is a writer in the story, and he's also a sleuth, and he's here to solve the crime. It's weird, it's daring, and I kind of love the campiness of it. I'm really, really excited for this one. As I said, I really love Honkaku Japanese murder mysteries in particular. This is going to be fun. The Tattoo Murder was awesome, I'm sure this will be too. Also, Pushkin sent me this really cool bookmark as well. Can't wait. Now, you might have been staring at this book over my shoulder for the past 2 minutes and realized why it might be hard for me to talk about this book at length in a video, but I'll do my best. This is Sluts, an anthology collection. It's a pretty dense thing. There's a lot of fiction in here. Lots and lots and lots of short stories by various queer authors talking about promiscuity in the 21st century. It was edited together by Michelle T, and what took me by surprise is the fact that I don't recognize 99% of the names in here, which is really, really cool. So many new writers, so many new names for me to discover. But that's all I know. This is an anthology collection about queer promiscuity in this day and age. Awesome. Slut shaming is dead. It is long behind us. Long live the sluts. This was also sent to me, by the way, by my friends at Cypher Press. They only put out great stuff, and I'm really, really excited to check this out. But as I said, it's a pretty dense thing. There's a lot of writing in here. While I am very glad that my patrons voted on The Remains of the Day as the book that I should reread in May, another book that was on that poll was Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I adore Kafka, and I need an excuse to do a video about him. And so instead of rereading Metamorphosis, I decided to go out and get myself a collection of his stories. This is The Unhappiness of Being a Single Man. It's a collection of lots and lots of really, really short Franz Kafka stories, about 2 or 3 of which I recognize. For example, in here is A Hunger Artist, one of the best short stories I've ever read, and I can't wait to read that one again. It's one of the longer stories in here, but I can't can't tell you how much Kafka means to me. I have a lot to say about Franz Kafka. He's an interesting person, a fascinating individual, a broken man whose work resonates so much right now in this era. I could talk about him for weeks. I have talked about him with friends a lot, and I needed an excuse to do a proper video about my love for Kafka without rereading the Metamorphosis. So, let's check these stories out. The Watchers by A.M. Shine is a horror novel that I so nearly picked up. Like 2 years ago maybe, it had just come out in hardback. I walked into Foyles in London and I saw it and I wanted it, and I stood on the fence for a while. I thought, compulsive book buying never ends well, I'll leave it. And now it's being made into a film. I was at the cinema a few weeks ago all by myself. I was watching The First Omen, which is really, really great, by the way. And a trailer for this came on, and I thought, hang on, wasn't that a novel? Huh. So what if I go out and get the novel, and then I read it, and then I watch the film, and then maybe I compare the two and do a little video? That sounds like fun. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do that. I need to see when the film is on, if it's on. I hope it's out in May. Otherwise I can't read this. Maybe I'll read it anyway. It sounds really good. I don't have anything else to say. Leigh Bardugo is an author that I've kind of gone back and forth on. I read the first Shadow and Bone book and I thought it was okay. I'm not a huge fan of YA fantasy. And then I read Ninth House, her dark academia novel set in Yale, and I really, really enjoyed that. And I definitely need to get the sequel Hellbent. I keep forgetting to do that. And this is her first historical novel. Also kind of fantasy inspired. There's a lot of magic in here. And I managed to get this gorgeous copy with sprayed edges, and I mean, look at this cover. I couldn't resist. Bardugo seems to only get better as she goes. The Shadow and Bone books were fine. Six of Crows was excellent. Ninth House was even better, so I'm hoping that this is her best book yet. I don't know, but I kind of bought it on an impulse, but also didn't because I knew it was going to be good. And actually way back at the start of this year, I did a huge list of books I was really looking forward to. Books that I knew were coming out this year that I was very excited to check out, and this was on that list. It was kind of an impulse buy because I thought it was out in May, and then I saw it on a shelf like 2 weeks ago. Anyway, this is not a story worth telling on a YouTube video. I'm gonna read The Familiars soon. Get excited, I am. Do you ever have like a really tiny regret? Like a regret that's so small it's not worth having. We all have big, massive regrets. Sure, sometimes they snow us under completely, but you can also have lots of tiny little regrets. Pathetic ones. And one of my tiny little pathetic regrets is that I never reviewed Sister Song by Lucy Holland. I read this book when it came out, I got the hardcover, and I think I was visiting my parents when I read it. I'm sure I read it at their house, and I didn't have my camera with me, and then got back to my regular life and kind of just moved on, and I didn't review this book, but Sister Song is really great. It's a piece of historical fantasy set in pre-medieval England. I thought it was great. I thought it was really good, and I'm so annoyed I never reviewed it or talked about it properly on this channel. But I can rectify that pathetic, tiny little insignificant regret by reading the next one. This is Song of the Huntress by Lucy Holland. It just came out. I got myself a copy, and I'm going to be reading it. This is not a sequel, it's just another book set in the same kind of situation, time and place. This book is set in 60 AD in Britain. Now, I love historical fiction very dearly, I've talked about that a lot, but so often when English writers write historical fiction, their books are set in the 17th or 18th centuries usually. The Victorian period is a pretty prominent one when it comes to historical fiction, and it's usually kind of gothic or industrial, and I love that stuff. It's my best stuff, but this is old. This is really old, and it's fantastical. So it's kind of like that infinite number of Greek mythology retellings that we've been getting over the past decade or so, but set in the UK instead. Sister Song was great, and I'm sure this will be too. Okay, one more, and I forgot to put it behind me, sorry about that. This is Boy Parts. Now, I've talked about Boy Parts before because I think I was going to read it like 2 months ago and I didn't. Let's try again. Boy Parts was the debut novel by Eliza Clark. Last year, year I read and adored her second novel, Penance. In fact, Penance made it onto my best books of the year list in 2023. I've had Boy Parts sitting on my TBR for quite a while. I read Penance on a whim, it turned out to be amazing, and so I went out and got Boy Parts, was gonna lap it up and just never did. Let's see if this is the month I actually finally read Boy Parts. People adore this book, and I adored Penance, so why wouldn't I like this? I just keep putting it off. I don't know why. So let's see if this is the month I actually read this fucking book. Those are the 10 books that I'm hoping to read in May. I might not stick to all of this because there are actually 2 or 3 books coming out in May that I really, really want to read, and I'm either going to run to my nearest bookshop or library and probably not be able to resist getting them. So let's see how this goes. If you enjoyed this and you feel like giving me a birthday present, support me on Patreon at patreon.com/willowtalksbooks. Your help, your support will keep the lights on and keep me very, very happy. Thank you, and subscribe for books.